Welcome. I'm Pam Laricchia from livingjoyfully.ca, and today I'm here with Nikki Zavitz. Hi, Nikki.
Hi, Pam.
Now, we have been connected online for a few years now, so I'm really excited to learn more about your unschooling journey. So, to get us started, can you share with us a bit about you and your family and what everybody's into right now?
Sure. So me and my family, we live in Ontario, Canada, in the Georgian Bay area. I'm married to my partner, Joel, and he is a landscape architect in the town near us. And we have three daughters, Noah, who's 10, Ayla, who's 8, and Chai, who's 6, but they all have birthdays coming up. So I'll have to get used to saying their ages, their new ages. Usually takes me a couple months to remember. But and we live on our dream property. It's just so lovely. Just a 1 acre. We live on a river and we have a big garden and chickens, and we've dabbled in bees, and it's just quite a lovely place to live and grow up for my kids. It's kind of what I always wanted as a child. I'm like a hobby collector. I just love learning new things, and so I have tons of passions and things going on all the time. My kids are really into skiing because we live near a ski hill, and we have an ice rink in the backyard, and we love playing board games together. And my kids are just into so many things. I could go on for hours about each of them, but they're always playing Minecraft together, and they're always hooting and hollering at each other. And there's a lot of excitement in the house when they're playing mini games and designing, and they play with their friends, and they could talk about Minecraft for hours and hours. It's usually most of our dinner conversations, Minecraft, what they're building and what YouTuber they were just watching. And they just love it. My oldest, Noah, she is quite creative and really she loves to set up Playmobil cities, and they take up our whole family room, and they're on the floor for weeks, and they go back to them whenever they want, and then gets a little messy and we clean it up and they start over. So that happens a lot. She's really into drawing. She loves drawing characters, which actually just sort of snowballed into making stop motion videos. And she really got into writing a play with the characters she was drawing. So that's kind of been something new and cool. She's also really into, and I asked my children's permission to make sure I could talk about them, and they were so excited about it. But Noah's 10, so she's kind of prepubescent right now, and she's actually really into talking with me about puberty and the menstrual cycle, and she's really embracing it because I kind of am really into that stuff, and I love learning about the cycle. And so we're talking about that all the time. It's quite wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. And Ayla, my 8-year-old, she's got so much energy. She loves gymnastics and playing with her. She loves to be silly with her little sister. They play, she's often playing pretend babies and house and teenagers. So she plays quite differently than my oldest. My oldest plays with little intricate characters, and Ayla's more into pretending real life, which is really cool to see the difference there. Ayla loves to also, since she was 4, she's really loved to and been into watching birth videos.
Oh, wow.
She's really into birth and babies and pregnant women. And we've borrowed videos from the midwives and stuff. And a friend of mine's daughter's a midwife, and she's always asking me questions about her job. And it's pretty cool. And I had a midwife for all 3 of them, so she loves hearing stories about them and stuff. It's been pretty neat to kind of explore that with her. And at first, it made me a little uncomfortable to be oh my goodness, a 4-year-old, but she's so interested in it, so passionate about it. So we just kind of roll with it.
Yeah.
And my youngest, Chai, she's a little firecracker. She's got so much energy too, and she's always making us laugh. And she loves to draw and sing and dance. And she loves to make little paper dolls. She has like 30 sets that she's made, like whole villages and characters, and she gives them away as gifts. They're so sweet. Yeah, so there's just always stuff going on, always things happening. And yeah, it's pretty great. They're at really great ages right now. We're kind of out of the drowning stage, so it's just kind of a cool worlds get opened up when you sort of move out of the younger stages. And yeah, it's pretty cool.
Wow. I really love hearing like the wide range of things, because if somebody's trying to answer, I love that you went into depth with each of them, because, you mentioned up first that how much they love Minecraft and how often that's a topic of conversation. And that's awesome. But sometimes people get stuck there too, right? It's like, that's their big thing. And they don't take that extra moment to look at all the other things that weave through their lives, when they get worried about a lot of time gaming or watching YouTube or whatever. But when you look at that bigger picture, that's when you start to see the other connections too. Like, from what they're watching on YouTube to what they're interested in, to watching birthing videos, like maybe how to drawing videos, just the wide range of how all their interests are not only like maybe even just tangentially connected to each other, but how you mentioned it too, how they're so very different from each other as well, like how you can see their personalities and who they are as a person starting to shine through the things that they're choosing, the kind of what they find interesting and how different it is. I love that piece because, they're all growing up. I saw it with my kids too. And many people see that, that they're really their own person, even at 4. Right? Even at, months old, you know what I mean? But when you give it the space and you support all the different things that they're interested in the moment, you start to see how their personality is weaving in, and you start to really see them as their own wonderful being, right? Does that make sense?
For sure. Yes, totally. And I loved answering that question and thinking about it, because I've never really I took a few notes on it because they're into so many things, and I've never really taken stock of all the stuff they're into right now. And it was like, this is awesome. I forgot all the stuff that they're into, because they do love Minecraft and they do play a lot of Minecraft. And sometimes that's in my view all the time. And it was really nice to be reminded when I wrote out and thought about each child. And I was like, oh my gosh, man, they are just doing so many things. They have so many interests. And I love that I was able to know it all too, off the top of my head. I was like, yeah, I just know so much about their interests. And I'd never really taken stock like that before. It was great. Thank you.
That's awesome. Oh, no problem. So I'd be curious to learn how you discovered unschooling and what your family's move to unschooling looked like. Like, where did you first hear about it?
Well, it's so funny because, I was a teacher and I taught for 10 years. And I wanted to be a teacher like my whole life. Like, really, it was like, I think my mom gave me my kindergarten, a book and I had written in kindergarten, I want to be a teacher. And it was just something I had kind of guided my whole path on. And I did have quite a different teaching style when I was teaching. I taught primary and I often had no desks and we had games all over and play centers. And I just tried to make it so much fun. I never assigned homework. So I kind of had a little bit of an unorthodox way of teaching. But when I started having kids, everything sort of shifted for me. And I did still teach between my first and second. I went, they're very close in age. They're all like 18 months apart. So I did go back between them, but it just felt like honestly torturous. And I don't mean that in a judgment way for anyone who is able to work, but it was so hard for me to have to, and maybe it's even the profession of teaching, but to have to be loving and kind and patient and give all this energy to children all day, leaving my little ones with, I shared a nanny at the time, so I didn't necessarily have to drop them off anywhere. A nanny came to our house, but it was still hard. Felt like I was missing so much. And it just felt wrong for me personally. And I felt like I wasn't doing my job a service or my kids. I just felt so torn. And that went on for 2 years. And then we got pregnant a third time. And when my third was born, when Chai was born, it was right around the time when I was supposed to be filling out paperwork for my oldest to go into school. She was just turning 4. And I had a little bit of a difficult birth with my third, and we had a little bit of a scary instance where something bad could have happened. So I got a little bit of a wake up call of like, what am I doing? You know, like, this is my one chance. This is my one life. I don't want to be excuse my language, but half-assing it, you know, here and here. I want to be, and I'm 100% type of person, and I wasn't that. And I just was like, I can't do it. I can't send her away when I'm home on mat leave with my new baby and my 2-year-old. I'm going to go send my just 4-year-old off to this. And I was a teacher at the school I was sending her, and I just couldn't do it. And I was like, you know what? I think I'm just going to keep her home. I taught kindergarten. I was like, I'll just, keep her home, and we'll keep doing our own thing here. And then at that point, homeschooling was kind of on my radar because my husband, some people he works with, their kids are homeschooled, but it's a very, I think it's more actual homeschooling and like a little bit of a religious homeschooling. So it was sort of on my radar, but I definitely knew that I didn't want to have the relationship with my children that I had with the kids I had at school when I was teaching. I knew I didn't want to have this like agenda for them and this coercion, and because I know what it's like. I knew what it was like teaching. I knew what it was like with some of those kids who weren't ready to be reading, and we're pushing them so hard in kindergarten. And I just that was the last thing I wanted. I just wanted to spend time with my kids and keep living with them. And so I just popped on the internet, as I do, research, and the crazy word unschooling came up, right?
Yeah.
Like, what is this? It sounds crazy and amazing. What is it? And I just started researching. I found your blog. I found Sandra Dodd's. I found John Holt books. I'm like a research junkie. So I just dove right in, and it just was one of those things that just was like, heck yeah, this sounds not only amazing, but it's like a continuation of what we're doing, because that's kind of what we're doing before we send our kids to school. We're just living and learning and supporting. And, I just was like, this sounds amazing. So yeah, intellectually, I got it right away. But it's been a whole journey of 7 years of actually practicing it. But yeah, it made sense right away for me. And my husband was so supportive, as he always is, of my craziness and my ideas. Yeah, so he trusted me, and I did get some, resistance from the people in my life because I had a really good job, and we were a double income family, and I was making really good money. And oh no, I had to let go of the pension, all of the lectures I got about that. But it was an easy decision for me to quit teaching and just kind of dive into my life as being a mom and learning alongside them. And yeah, so I guess that's the story of how we came across unschooling. And now I feel, go ahead. Sorry, Pam.
Well, I was just going to say so many connections that I felt along the same lines with my journey. I was, my kids were in school by the time, I came across it, but that feeling, between the pull between work and parenting, and getting to that point where I felt like I was not doing the service or the work, not applying myself the way that I wanted to in either space. And that just, I didn't feel good about myself in either, like at work or at home, right? So I really related to that feeling. And it was, okay, for me, it's always questioned my premises. Like before I didn't, that's kind of what I've always done, a way I've approached, like when things aren't feeling right, what are the assumptions that I'm working with that have gotten me into a situation where nothing is feeling right? So that was definitely a huge part of my choice. And in fact, I ended up leaving work before I even discovered homeschooling, like choosing to come home first. And then it was more research, and I was researching school, how to support them in school, and came homeschooling. I was like, what? That's saying that moment that like, what?
Yeah. I know there's another option. What?
Yes. And then, very quickly, once you start kind of, searching online around homeschooling, you come up with various styles, and then unschooling, and then like that big like moment where you go, wow, that's crazy and so cool. And, and then you just keep tumbling down that rabbit hole, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm so grateful that I don't know if the word's brave, because I actually feel like I was sort of being a little bit cowardly to not send her, but I feel so grateful that I was like, maybe just aware is the word I'm looking for, just aware enough to know that that voice was serious, that I was like, this just does not feel right. And what we're doing right now is amazing. So it's not like we needed a different option. It was just like arbitrary, that age hits. And and it was amazing because I taught in that system, and I like worked my whole life to get there. And I did love my job, but now looking back, I have a completely different perspective of my job. And just the learning that I see now is just so different compared to what I was doing when I was a teacher. But anyways, that's a whole nother conversation, but yeah.
Yeah, no. And that's a cool conversation too. And it is how we've had a lot of the podcast guests have come from being teachers, and having that insight into that world, and that insight into how learning is structured there, and then seeing how it unfolds in their own family, and that being a pivotal moment for them, in really understanding the value for them and for their kids of living and learning.
Yeah.
So the other huge piece that you mentioned was, and I love this, it's something that I have become more and more kind of passionate about, it is like when you first come across it, right? And it makes so much sense. It's like, yes, and then we want to dive in. But understanding it intellectually to the process to living it is huge. It's like night and day. It's like
so huge.
It's like you think it's like, oh my gosh, unschooling, that sounds wonderful. You kind of think, oh, look, I've decided I'm at the end of my journey. But actually, it's almost really just the beginning, right? As you learn how to just live that way with your kids, and you're learning about everything, right? You're learning about yourself, you're learning about your kids, you're learning about so much, and it's not that it ever stops, but the bulk of that is kind of what we typically call the deschooling process, right? So
for sure,
over those years, I'd be curious what one of the more challenging aspects of that deschooling journey was for you, and if you could talk a little bit about how you worked your way through it.
Yeah, I feel like we could spend the whole podcast talking about this because I I think because of my background with teaching, I feel my deschooling process, it's just been so ongoing and very intense. And like, I am so passionate about unschooling. And like I said, I read every book and I listened to every podcast and took notes and highlighted. And we had discussion groups at my house, and I run the Facebook page, and but oh my gosh, the deschooling for me, it's like flipped me upside down. Like truly, I think the hardest part overall, and there's so many connections off of it, was that the fact that like it was all about me at the same time as being not about me at all. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Way to say it.
Like I was the student of unschooling. It's all me having to unlearn things, and it was just like so many, and Anne talks about this and you talk about this all the time, like so many layers, so many things I would bump up against that made me uncomfortable. And it was always about me. Like that, me meaning I had to definitely like really dig into those feelings. And oh man, like we've been unschooling for 7 years and I still feel like I'm brand new at it. Like, and it's a really cool feeling, weirdly, because it's like proves how much unlearning I've had to do, and how my kids are like, they're just like my teachers for it. It's really incredible. So I say that that's the hardest part, and I mean that because it never ends, I think. And I'm like the type A. I really love things that are black and white. Take it off. Oh, I got that now. I can move on. And it's just never been like that. And I mean that in the greatest way, but the hardest way.
It's so true. I love that because I mean, I that urge to be able to tick it off, to like feel like, oh, it's done. But then, you realize as well along the way that, our kids are always changing. We're always changing. And like you said, that's the fun part, because it always means that there's so many possibilities ahead, right?
Yeah.
It's being open to where everybody is in the moment and where we're all kind of looking to go. So, we unschooled for 20 odd years, and it's totally not done that way, because it becomes a lifestyle. It becomes about who we want to be as people, and that never ends. Right?
Right. It's life. Yeah. And it's so funny because I think in the beginning, because I came from the teaching background, and I like wanted to like study for unschooling. That's what I was doing. I was like studying it. I was reading the books and following mentors, and it was like I just immersed myself in it, which is really great. But I think I still had this idea that I could ace unschooling. I could just like be the best at it, and I could get it right, and I've slowly started to learn to let go of that. But still immersing myself in it, but without the outcome that I'm going to get this right,
But that is completely and utterly part of the deschooling journey.
Yes.
Isn't it? Because I think so many of us go into it that way. It's our kids, it's our parenting. We want to do it right. We want to do it well. And one aspect of the whole deschooling journey is questioning the expectations we set up for ourselves, the goals, like what really is success, what value do having expectations have, and then and we work through it with regards to our kids, right? And then at some point, journey, it's like, oh, this also all applies to me.
Yeah.
And questioning ourselves along the way, that becomes another huge piece. And it is at that point. And like you said, it is so valuable to immerse ourselves in it, right? To find groups that connect with us, where we can have these kinds of conversations, because it's not something that, it's still alternative enough that, there's not, I know you've got a local group, which is awesome. And you were having conversations in your home. But it was something that, I didn't know people who were doing it. I didn't.
Yeah.
So even whether it's online groups or person-to-person groups, whatever, but it is so different than what we were used to for many of us, depending on where we come to it from, that immersion is so helpful for us to keep questioning things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Rather than take that step, think we've got the answer, and then just step back and do it. Because really, realistically, that first level of learning about unschooling and thinking, oh, this is so cool, that's like just the top layer of that onion.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. And if you stop peeling the onion, it's going to be really hard to get where you want to go, right? Creating that thriving, unschooling, just atmosphere in your family is going to be so hard to get to if you've only looked at that first layer of the onion, right?
Yeah. And it brings up, like, I was talking about how knowing that it's about me, and also something that I think I am still learning to embrace is trust. And I feel like that's like the center of unschooling. And it's something I've had a really hard time with, to be honest. And it's just this thing that really puts a magnifying glass on me when I have trouble with trusting myself, trusting the process, trusting my kids. And yeah, I don't know, that's a major theme that I see when I'm struggling or feeling uncomfortable. It usually has to do with trust. So yeah, and I'm still reminded of this daily, and it's been 7 years. I'm in the messy middle, Pam. Like, this is it. Like, what I was thinking about me being on your podcast, and how I don't have the gift. I feel like I don't have the gift of hindsight. I'm like right in the messiness of it. So that being said, I feel like it's nice to hear stories from people like me too, because yeah, I'm in the thick of it, and I'm struggling with some stuff, and I'm, meeting all these major themes. And yeah, it's just important to, I think, hear that, because I feel so inspired by you and your podcast and a lot of your guests, because you guys, you've gone through it. You have the beauty of hindsight. But when you're in the messy middle, sometimes it's just like it's hard, and you don't want to focus on it being hard. But it's nice to talk about the things that you're working through. Anyways, is kind of what I'm trying to say.
I love that you brought that up. Part of me wants to say that messiness doesn't go away.
Yeah. Right?
Life.
You're so
life
right. Yeah.
is messy, and we, people who've been doing it for a long time, or whose kids are older, you know what? I mean, we're still in relationship with our kids, which is what unschooling ultimately boils down to, right? That trust and relationship with your kids. And we're all going through hard moments in life, right? So
for sure.
Things do get messy now, and we're still working through it. There's never that other side of the fence where it's like, oh, that reminds me, because that was something when I used to blog a lot, when I would work through whatever issue it was that I was talking about, and I would eventually end up with some sort of sentence where it's like unschooling is life. And there was a time when I realized just where you are now that, you know, I'm in this messy middle. I want to figure this all out so that we can get there. So we can get to that graceful, loving, beautiful, trusting place.
Yeah.
That's candy and lollipops.
Yeah.
Made it, right?
Mm-hmm.
The realization that that goal was not helpful and also not realistic, that
Yes.
these messy days this is what it's all about. These days are it. It's not some goal, because in that mess, we're learning so much. We're figuring out so much, and we're just working through it together. That, you know, I got to that point for the most part, because it's not fun to stay in the mess.
No, and even to be venting about it.
Right?
And I don't mean to do
it.
that.
Like, that's the other piece is actually, you know, when you're feeling in the mess, it's asking ourselves the questions, peeling back those layers of onions for ourselves, finding that trust is something that keeps coming up for me. How am I, you know, and playing with that, because the messes change and how we react and how we choose to sit with that discomfort a little bit longer, trusting that things will start popping up. You know, all those pieces are the learning that happens in there. Doesn't mean that 10 years from now, a mess walks through the door and you're like, yay. I don't, you know, it's still hard. But I love that point. And I do love having people on so many different points of the journey, right? Because it is so important and so valuable, I think, to hear voices at each point, because so often I think people, you know, worry that when things are messy or messy for too long, that they're, you know, maybe not doing it right, and get down on themselves. It doesn't mean you do nothing, right? Like we were talking about, when it's messy, you're trying to work things out. You're trying to figure things out. But that's the journey. That's not you, like, not quite being somewhere.
Yeah.
You're where you need to be, right? You're exactly where you need to be right now. I'm going to link that Amy Steinberg song because it's awesome.
Yeah. And it's so true. Like I had, and I think I mentioned this to you in the email, like I even had a little bit of imposter syndrome with you asking me, because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm definitely not a perfect unschooler. I'm still learning. I'm grappling with lots of things that continually come up. It's been 7 years. I've had all these thoughts that I should be further than this. But then taking in, and when you asked me all these questions, I had so much to say about it, with our journey and what we've gone through and how amazing it's been along the way and how hard it's been too. And I think it's so nice to hear from all sorts, but also for me to express how much I appreciate hearing from people like you who've just had more practice, pretty much, right?
Exactly. And it's a practice. I love thinking of it that way, because it's not something that you accomplish and you're done. It is a practice. It is a lifestyle. It's a way of living. It's a way of approaching your days. That makes sense to you. That's why you're choosing it, right? But it's to think about it. That's why I always talk about, if you're asking yourself, am I done deschooling? Then you're probably not done.
Yeah, I have not.
But you have a goal of finishing deschooling.
I have known in my heart, I don't know if I'll ever be done deschooling, and I am perfectly okay with that.
Perfect.
Because, that's kind of what it is. I feel like that's what it's all about, you know?
Now, you mentioned we connected before the call, and you spoke then about being a recovering perfectionist and how that has guided you on your unschooling journey. So I'd love to hear a bit more about that.
Yeah, so this is very related to the deschooling. And so I'm definitely right now in a place, I've come a long way, and I'm very comfortable now seeing myself as like a recovering perfectionist, and kind of really having dug into that and knowing sort of what that behavior for me was doing. Like, it was a coping mechanism, right?
Mm-hmm,
So really kind of digging into that has been very helpful. But it's, if you asked me if we had this call 4 years ago, it would have been a completely different take on my perfectionism. But yeah, it's been like, the perfectionism's been like almost like a map of, finding the things that are uncomfortable for me, because it's like the opposite environment of how an unschooling home would thrive, because you want to be embracing the learning and the mistakes and the freedom and the comfort in the uncomfortableness. And perfectionism is like avoiding all of those things.
yeah.
So yeah, and that's what kept happening. I was like bumping up against a lot of things, excuse me, that were uncomfortable. And it was just a great continual reminder that I had a lot of work to do, but not in the sense of like trying to be better, more in the sense of trying to unlearn that behavior, which is a huge paradox, like to think like that.
So much of it is a paradox, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I think, did you find that it ties back? Because it did for me, because I learned through school, learned to pursue, the good marks and the, and to feel bad when I didn't get them and that kind of stuff. And for me, you mentioned earlier learning so much from your kids. And I think for me, this was something in my deschooling process that I learned through watching my kids, because, they would try things and they wouldn't work out. And so often it didn't matter to them. They just kept trying again. They just tried something different. And I would watch them and I'd like, in my head, I'm saying to myself, if that thing went that wrong for me, I would have like run to the bedroom and hidden, to make sure nobody saw or whatever, you know what I mean? That was something that I learned to embrace through watching my kids and realizing, you know what, because you're questioning yourself. It's like, okay, why would I have that reaction? What is it? How is it good for them? Like, I see them moving forward and learning more. And that was just more information for them, as I'm figuring it out for myself. And, why can't I just use that as information? Why do I feel so embarrassed? I don't think less of them for having something go wrong. I bet they wouldn't actually be thinking less of me. It's just me thinking less of me. That's that whole kind of can of worms that you sit and kind of dig into when you realize something's getting in your way like that, right?
Yeah. And watching, exactly. Kind of seeing my kids as like, they're amazing mirrors for me, right? Like, I have 3 amazing mirrors all the time, just shining back at me of the things that, but yeah. And the perfectionism too, I think in your summit, Anne maybe said it, she was talking about expectations being pre-planned resentments. Which, wow, that like, it's so true. When I have all these like plans and things that I have in my mind of how it's supposed to go, it never goes that way. Not really, anyways. Not freely and organically and with joy often. And that was happening a lot. And yeah, I really had to kind of zone in and think about that behavior of mine, and because I want to be giving my kids those messages that learning, that's part of it. Mistakes are so valuable. Mistakes in quotes are so valuable. And I spent my whole life avoiding them.
Right.
So, and now I'm like guiding my kids through this world of like trying to make mistakes all the time and risks and trying new things. And it's not part of, it's not, it's not my personality or my normal behavior. So it's something I have to like try to do all the time. And my husband laughs because he's like the opposite of me. And he thinks it's so funny how I have to try really hard to like do things that come so easily to someone else. So that's the amazing thing about personality, you know? Everyone's journey is different. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And it's different for so many reasons, right? Like personality is a huge piece of it, but then, you know, our experiences growing up, the things we like,
for sure,
how we like to do things. That's what's so fun and challenging about weaving unschooling into a family, right? Because it's going to look different with each of our own kids. It's not going to look like the unschooling family down the street or in the next town or whatever. And I think that's part of it is at the beginning, we are looking for those answers. We are looking how to do it because we want to do it right. Right.
Yes.
And then we're trying those things and it doesn't look the same in our family. You know, we do those things but, you know, it's not, they aren't as happy with it, or I'm not as happy with it, or it's not going as smooth. That is all part of the deschooling. It's not that you're doing it wrong per se, but it's digging that layer deeper to see that, you know, their choices were made with respect to their family or with respect to that child, you know, whatever it is they're describing. So what to take out of those kinds of shares of other people's experiences. I love thinking about the idea of advice because it's not advice. It's sharing our experiences. So it's more about how did we come up with that choice that worked really well for our child. You know, it's because, you know, we figured out who they were, what they were trying to accomplish, what their personality is, you know, how we mesh, how we communicate. And we put all of that together to come up with this cool thing, you know, activity or whatever that worked, you know, develop that relationship that's working really well for us that we're excited to share about. But it's not about the action, right? It's about all the stuff that wove together,
the process
that bloomed.
Yeah. The roots.
The roots. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The roots of unschooling. So that's, as we're immersing ourselves in it, that's what we're piecing together from everybody else's experiences and stories, you know, which is why I'm here. And what is this episode 200 odd something? Because it's so different. It's so fascinating to hear everybody else's stories because some of the stories will connect more closely with a listener and others. Absolutely. So you may get more insight from particular episodes, particular family stories, etc. But they're still not an answer. The answer. That's still something the fun and the fear of knowing we need to figure this out ourselves, right?
Yeah. I always had this like visual for unschooling for me. It's been like, I picture it being this like big giant house and it's got like 1 million rooms in it and there's closets and doors everywhere. And for me, I'm like walking around this house with this lantern and the lantern is like unschooling for me. And I have to like open up doors and shine the lantern and look under the beds and look in the closet. And like, I'm finding all these new, like dusty things that are kind of have come from my life that have created these uncomfortableness and this kind of scary, eerie feeling for me. And the unschooling is the light, like walking through, shining light on it, considering it, asking questions, and eventually, you know, the more lights are on and the closets aren't as dusty anymore and the rooms are more open and free to go in and out of. And I kind of see that. I've always pictured my unschooling journey like that and then everybody's house is different. everyone has a different unschooling house. And I just love that visual for me. I'm always kind of picturing it like that. Like, oh, I found another room that I have to look in, and I haven't been in this room yet. I'm like, I'm going to just step my toe in this room and then step back out, and maybe I'll come back again later. And I just love that visual for me.
I do. I love that image, Nikki. That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And something else I wanted to touch on. We've been talking about the dance of unschooling relationships, right? And often that includes sharing pieces of our personal journey. Like we talk about so much of it, it's all about us and not about us at all. But sharing pieces of our journey with our children as it connects to what's going on in the moment, as it bubbles up in our conversations. So I'd just be curious to hear how you see that unfolding in your lives.
Yeah, that's been an interesting thing to think about as well, because we've had a kind of a bit of a tough year this year, and a lot of things came up that were more obvious to the kids, where there was a lot of conversations that were had about things that were new to them. And they're at an older age now where we can definitely be having those conversations. And I say all this with, I don't ever want this to define me, but I have kind of lived with anxiety and depression since I was a child. Okay. It definitely doesn't define me, but it is something that's definitely been something I've gone through for a long time. And yeah, having those conversations is an everyday thing in our home, talking about them, because, and I'm learning more and more still about this, but I would never hide a broken arm or diabetes if I had that, if I was struggling with that in my life. Yeah. And when I was a kid, no one was talking about mental health, and I felt so different. I felt like something was wrong with me. I felt like I was so different than everybody. I felt like, I felt like I was the only one in the world that felt like that. And I think that that's such a disservice for mental health, because with silence and isolation comes shame. And, I definitely grappled with that. And if I had someone in my life who was like, oh, I kind of have those feelings sometimes, or I know someone, I just would have felt so much less alone and been more apt to talk about it. And so I'm always having those conversations with my kids, because I want them to know that everyone has a mental health journey. Some people's they have to be more present and on top of it. And other people's, it's something that maybe they don't have to worry about as much, but mental health is for everyone. And yeah, it's been really a gradual thing that's just a norm in our home. Like my daughter and I, my middle daughter, we have very similar personalities. I really try not to project my experience on her, though, because that can happen easily when you can relate to someone. But her and I generally have daily conversations about, strategies for our anxiety and worries, and we talk about them together. She'll remind me about a strategy that I could be using, and I'll remind her. And it's like normal conversation in our home. And for me, that's been great, because it's just part of life. It's not something that defines us, but it's not a shadow that's, in the corner. It's kind of like in the house. So we've shined the light on it. It's can't take us down. It's part of our life. We sort of embrace it. And yeah, I just want them to feel like they could talk to me about anything, and that this is a safe environment for conversations like that. And yeah, and that kind of stems also into my oldest wanting to know about the menstrual cycle. And, we're always talking about those things. I'm really into learning about how I am at certain times in my cycle, and the girls were always talking about that. They have so much knowledge about, we're not always feeling the same way every day, and that's okay. And yeah, it's been really great. It's a passion of mine, kind of learning and talking about that, and having girls that are also interested in it, and it's become part of their life. So
wow, that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
mm-hmm.
I really loved your point about everyone has a mental health journey. And I think something that's really valuable to bring up, because when we learn about unschooling, it so much seems, it seems wonderful, it seems really healthy, and I think sometimes people, I've seen memes go around, so my kid doesn't need to see a psychologist later, and absolutely they don't. An unschooling lifestyle where you're open and you're talking about things and you're talking about strategies that help, and you're talking about how we feel different day to day, and like you're having those conversations openly, it doesn't mean that therefore our kids won't have challenges down the road. Right. So it's not something to do for an acceptable result down the road, but it's a way of life, right? It's a way, I don't want to be hiding, mental health challenges at all. Want to be having conversations as it comes up. You can feel where it kind of crosses a line. That's the dance of relationship we have with our kids. When they're starting to feel a weight from conversations that we're having, and okay, I'm going to step a little bit, or I'm going to let them bring it up for the next while. Because what we're choosing in the moment is what feels right to us in the moment. Doesn't mean that 3 weeks from now we're going to be doing something different, right? Because we're living in the moment with them. So I think such a beautiful thing to bring up, that this is it's about self-awareness, helping each other, gain self-awareness. We learn how things change over time, how things change day to day, and it doesn't end some result when they're no longer school age, right? This is about how we live as a person, isn't it? And our relationship continue on forever.
Yeah, and it brings up so many opportunities for them to ask questions, to walk away from the conversation, to not really be interested, to show empathy, ways to have understanding for others. Like, it stemmed into conversations about, even just me, I'm a very aware person. I'm educated. I have a wonderful family, an amazing husband. I have a roof over my head and food, and I still have mental health challenges. So it brought up conversations about, can you imagine how hard it would be for someone who doesn't have all those things? And that's empathy at its best, thinking about, it's really taught my kids empathy and understanding, and to know, unschooling doesn't mean they're never going to have therapy, but to me, it means that they're open to be talking about needing therapy with me.
Yes, that's beautiful, right?
Yeah. So, and that's amazing. I feel like that's part of the relationship, the building of the relationships, and yeah, it's just been a really, an interesting way for us to get to know each other more, and for them to, and at an appropriate amount for their ages and stuff, but just knowing kind of some things that I've been going through, and then also for them to be able to witness my husband and my relationship through that, and how we support each other, and ways that one of us has to pick up the slack more when the other's feeling a little less. It just gives them the opportunity to be present during life, really.
Well, that's beautiful. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. So I would love to know, what is your favorite thing about your unschooling lives right now?
Oh my goodness, that's hard.
Easy question, right?
I think, I absolutely love just the richness and the deepness of our relationship. I know them so well, but I'm learning more and more about them every day. them for me as well. And also just learning alongside them. Like, oh, it's so amazing how much we're learning together, and we're not even seeking learning. Like, it's just unraveling before us, with my passions and my thirst for learning. And they get stuff from what I'm learning, and I get stuff from what they're learning, and we're strewing for each other. It's just such a beautiful dance. Yeah. It's so great. I love it.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, I love that. It's just the richness of your lives as you're living together. And yeah, you get to that point where learning just weaves into your days without any thought per se, because, without any intention, maybe. But the intention is to do what you enjoy doing, right? To follow your passion, see what comes up, and boom, and I love when you get to that point too, where they're bringing stuff that they think you'll be interested in. You're bringing stuff to them. Everybody's just kind of living together joyfully, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it's a beautiful life. It really is. With all the messiness of it too. It's just quite wonderful.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so awesome. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to speak with me, Nikki. I loved our conversation. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, me too. Thank you so much for having me on. Oh, I feel honored. It was wonderful.
Oh, it was so wonderful for me too. Like we were saying, I'm learning all the time. I'm making new connections, new topics are coming up. I just have so much fun chatting with other unschooling parents. So thank you so much for joining us. And before we go, where can people connect with you online?
So I'm just a regular old Joe. I don't really have a blog or anything. I am on Instagram as Nikki Zavitz. I do run the Collingwood Unschoolers Facebook page and the Collingwood Unschoolers Instagram. And I also run, we do like a children's makers market every year where I organize, and the kids get to have their own booths and make stuff. So that's really fun if you're local, but, and there's an Instagram page for that, but yeah.
But see, that's also ideas for people too. Maybe they are local. We're reasonably local to each other as far as the unschooling world goes. I mean, we're only an hour away, right?
I know. It's pretty amazing.
That's so wonderful. Well, thank you so much again, and have a wonderful day, Nikki.
Thanks, Pam.